So it really is that when you start to do self-care habits and tools, and what happens is you start to actually take care of the whole self, right? So I thought that was
I mean,
fascinating.
we're very much, we're a complicated organism. There's so many moving parts and non-moving parts, but we can't just take care of one little bit.
My next guest is Kate Horsburgh. She's a qualified yoga teacher, yoga therapist, integrative nutrition health coach, reflexologist, massage therapist, Reiki master, and holistic chef. Kate's philosophy in life is to do everything possible to make the most of it. She loves to help people improve their health, mental, physical, and emotional well being so they too can maximize their time on earth, healthy and for as long as possible. Kate, welcome to Stronger Balance Lifestyle Podcast. It is so wonderful to have you.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here as well.
Yeah, so I asked you to come on today because you and I are very similar in our approach to life. And I wanted to pick a topic that I think is so important. And that topic is self care. And the title is self care selfish? So I'd like to discuss self care, what that means to you, what that means to me, and why it is so important for us to focus on ourselves and to bring in some more love and nurturing into our lives. So,
A huge topic, Debbie, and so important, I think. I'm glad you picked this one. This is a particular favorite of mine.
yeah, so let's jump in. So, what does that word then, self care, mean to you?
Well, I think generally people would see it as the sort of deliberate and conscious actions that you would take to maintain or even improve the health of your mind, body, spirit, your energy, your heart, whatever, all the different facets of yourself to, and speaking as a yoga teacher, to bring yourself back into harmony and balance and to keep yourself in harmony and balance so you can stay healthy, so you can live your best life, you can be energetic and do everything. But the sort of the fundamentals around taking care of yourself. So yeah, self-care, taking care of yourself.
Yeah, and I think you brought up something. So, being a yoga teacher, that's a thing that we both share. And when we study yoga and the understanding of yoga, the word yoga is to yoke the body, the mind, and the soul. It's to come to the present moment, all parts of you, to not be in your mind in the past, in your mind in the future, but rather being in this moment and taking time off, kind of like to polish yourself, to be here and to notice what needs attention. And so maybe that's part of it for both of us as well, is that we bring in our yogic wisdom and our love of yoga and understanding of yoga, the value that is there for the self and taking care of the self. So I think that's part of that as well. Yeah, and then you kind of mentioned a little bit about the different areas. I think that's important to talk about as well. So when we talk about self-care, there's different parts of us we're speaking about. So, whether we're talking about the mind, the mental, emotional, we've got the spiritual aspects of ourselves, whether we have an organized religion or a spirituality like Eastern philosophies, the physical body, which for me, I think is probably one of the most important. And then what other parts are there? I know that,
We talked about energy and heart, so mental, emotional, spiritual, um, and then body, obviously, like as you just said.
yeah. Yeah. And I think that, well, what I see when I work with women too, especially with bone health issues or issues with trying to be the best, healthiest versions of themselves as they age, I see that there's not a lot of attention on these areas. So for me, the physical body is so important because mine broke when I was 50, and I know what that's like. But it's everything in totality. It's how you move, how you think, how you eat, and what you choose to do about that. So let's talk about some of those areas in particular and some ways, what would self-care mean in each one of those areas. So when we're talking about the physical body, so talk about some ways that we could think of physically to take care of ourselves.
I think for me, when I'm talking to clients or even thinking for myself about self-care, it starts with observing. It starts with understanding and knowing what it is that you have, what it is that you want, and what it is that's maybe lacking, so that you can then incorporate self-care practices into your daily routine and hopefully build them up into being regular habits so that you don't get back into that state of lack again. So as self-care, for me, the most important one, the one I start with every single day, is hydration. So very simple. I make a pot of tea every morning and I fill up a water bottle. They're both here on my desk. And I can just go about my business doing everything else, but I know that I can kind of have a gauge of how much I'm drinking, because that's just a very simple fundamental. So many people walk around dehydrated, and then that has those other knock-on effects. So something very simple, nuts and bolts, like staying hydrated. If you're talking about the body, that's just an example. I think
Yeah,
what,
and
yeah,
even movement, people don't think about this, but movement actually contributes to hydration. And hydration, the two of the things that happen as we age are oxidation and dehydration. Those are the two main things. If you cut an apple and you start to see the brown part of the apple, that's called oxidation. It's cellular breakdown. It's part of life. It's what happens. And then you'll see that that apple will lose its moisture and it starts to shrivel, right? So those are the two things that happen in our bodies, dehydration and oxidation. And when we move, motion is lotion. So hydrating with tea, hydrating with water, but also bringing in movement, because movement is hydrating tissues. We know that it creates moisture release, actually water release in the connective tissue that surrounds every muscle and bones and nerves and all that. So yeah, hydration, movement, making a pot of tea, just thinking of the word hydration. So how could we go against the breakdown there with hydration? And you spoke about water. I also think it's really important to bring in the movement piece to that, because people don't realize that you turn into tight, stiff, and dry if you don't move. So yeah, hydration is so important. So
and with
hydration
that,
through movement, hydration through tea.
yeah, well, it's herbal tea, so it's mostly water. But your movement piece again, that helps with detoxification, because you've got your whole lymphatic system, which is dependent on muscle action to flow, and that's the way waste materials are removed from the body, or one of the ways. So we're not moving. So all those little things, I think, quite often with the body, we can go through life to a certain point, taking it, sort of letting the body look after itself, and then you get to a certain point in life. Quite often for women, it coincides with the menopause. It's that perfect storm of aging and a big shift in hormones, where actually you can't take it for granted anymore, and then you're forced into thinking about self-care. So I think self-care around menopause in women anyway is a forced issue, and that's good, because something has to stop people in their tracks and let them start taking care of themselves a little better.
Yeah, and even the fact that we need to be forced. When you look at statistics, statistically, women have more illnesses than men. And so, and I think part of that, what I always think for myself, because knowing myself, being a mom and all the roles I've played in this life, we give so much, we do so much for others, and we don't think of ourselves. And so, like you said, then we're forced, which is just a shame that it even has to come to that place of force. And so, then you and I, being health coaches and yoga teachers, I think that we really realize all those components and why this becomes so important, and how, because we both live this life. And I think that's what's really important is living this life and choosing this for ourselves. Okay, so and what I loved about what you just did, Kate, so you talked, I said, let's talk about self-care. You went into hydration and water and something you consciously start your day with, and making a pot of tea and taking your water bottle with you, which is something that I do as well. When I leave the house, I fill my water bottle up, and I typically put things in it like trace minerals, because of mineral imbalance is so prevalent amongst the women that I work with. And or I'll put in liquid amino acids. There's a protein blend that I love that helps to build tissues. So you spoke about that. And then I said, well, then movement creates hydration. And then you went into, and movement supports detoxification. So it really is that when you start to do self-care habits and tools, and what happens is you start to actually take care of the whole self, right? So I thought that was
I mean,
fascinating.
we're very much, we're a complicated organism. There's so many moving parts and non-moving parts, but we can't just take care of one little bit. It's like when you decorate your house, you realize that all the other rooms need doing as well. To start practicing self-care, you think, oh yeah, and I need to take a little bit better care of my eyes, and oh, I really need to take better care of my emotional well-being. You know, whether that's monitoring who you're spending your time with to make yourself feel better, because we get a lot of interaction with people that might not be so positive. So as you get older, to protect yourself, self-care, you might decide to step away from some relationships. So self-care can look like action as well as actual sort of physical practice. And I think that's a very interesting aspect that a lot of people don't necessarily think about when you say self-care.
Yeah, the term that I've heard recently in the last few years is energy vampires, that
Yeah.
there's energy vampires in your life. And I would say that that's a conscious decision that I've been making in my life as well, is who do I energetically want to spend my time with? Not even just like physical people. And then doing what I do as a teacher and working with women privately also, that's also a relationship. And then what are you bringing into yourself? So we're consumers, right? So we know we consume food, and that food has to be digested, absorbed, assimilated, and eliminated. And we focus on those for habits. What about what we consume with our eyes and ears? We consume gossip, we consume the energy of that person, whether they're complaining or whatever it is. That also has to be digested, absorbed, assimilated, and most importantly, eliminated. So you're
Mm.
right, making the choice of consuming others, and whether it's news or physically with people, it is a big choice. And we can't always avoid everyone. We could pick and choose our friends, but sometimes family members, that's a harder, you know. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But then that's also about deciding how you're going to interact and deciding how you're going to react and what your perspective is going to be, because you can control that to a certain extent. You can go into a situation which is a very triggering one with a family member, say, as you said, can't necessarily decide that you're going to move them out of your life. But deciding maybe beforehand, I work through clients with scripts. You have this situation that comes up again and again and again. It's incredibly draining, it's stressful, it's actually making you ill. Let's work on a script so that next time this happens, you can just relax into this kind of pre-planned conversation and preserve your own boundaries. So self-care would also be about preserving your boundaries and protecting yourself.
And realizing that you need to. So self-care, be even realizing that that's a need. I like to teach like visual things for people to remember. So I talk about becoming Teflon and not Velcro. So becoming non-stick. So the words people are saying, the things people are saying, that doesn't stick onto you and become you, but rather like Velcro would, you make it Teflon. So Teflon and not Velcro. And that's kind of as you're there listening at part of that conversation, especially with family. I would say this is really important with family because you can't always, you know, remove people from your life, and or a boss or a nasty neighbor, or you have to travel on the train to work and you're standing next to people that wreck your peace, and you need to not let them wreck your peace, creating those boundaries. So having those tools, and even Kate, to me, I feel like what I learned from yoga when I first started practicing in my mid 30s was this: raising awareness is the key to everything. That's when we can make shifts. And so hopefully today we share some raised awareness in different areas of what's important and why it's important. Because once you go into a dark room and you turn on the lights, you could see what you need to do in that room, right? Whether you could see how you could walk through the room, you could see what needs to be removed from the room, what needs to be changed. But until you turn on the lights, you will be banging into everything. You won't see what needs to happen or what room it is. It's that raised awareness, turning on, shedding the light to the fact that we need an energy field, or we are energetic beings, and we need to create a shield so we don't get hurt if we find ourselves in situations where we're constantly getting hurt or drained or whatever. So even that is
Yeah, absolutely. And self-care is so much about self-awareness, as you just said, switching on the light, seeing what is there, and actually seeing what is really there, not what's in your imagination and what you're bringing with you to color what you're seeing, trying to see it clearly and understand yourself. Because once you understand yourself, you're always learning. You can just go through life in a much more comfortable, easy way, because you can do the things that you need to do for yourself to look after yourself better and make yourself strong and happy and content and all those things that we aspire to be, to live a happy life.
yeah, people always say to me, "You're so happy. You seem so happy." And I just worked with a client yesterday that I've been working with for 22 months, actually. And she said to me, "You know, Debbie, something you said that you work on being like, for you, being happy is important and you choose happiness." And I said, "It's true. Not that I'm Pollyanna and I have life and I have things in my life, but I have decided that this is the life that I have. And I like to go to the number 100. So, whatever age I am, I have that many more years left. Right now, I'm at 43, 43 more years. And when you look at it that way, it's so many more years. It's a lot, right? Instead of looking like, wow, that 57 just went by like that, but rather I've got 43 left. And when I think of it that way, how do I want to live this life? And when you start to do that, and you know what we were just talking about, raising awareness, turning on the light in the room to see what needs attention, and raising attention or paying attention, then you start to implement the self-care tools or habits that you need to help whatever facet of your life it is that needs attention. And that's
And
probably the first step.
I
Sorry.
couldn't agree with you more, and I love that you put a number on it, because if you think about even your physical body as being a machine like a car, you think, well, I need this car to last for another 43 years. There are things that you're going to have to do to make sure that you maintain it, because you can't just leave it in the yard. Don't put any good petrol in it or fuel. Don't pump up the tires. Don't ever clean it and expect that it's going to go through. It's going to fall apart at some stage. That's inevitable. But if you maintain, you're that classic car that just goes on forever and just gets more and more beautiful. So, yeah.
Yes, and that is such a big thing for me because my injury and my collapsed hip joint at 50 stopped me in my tracks. You know, very active person to bam, you're stuck. And then also doing what I do, I've worked with people since 2014. I've taught yoga to the aging population, those of us that are 50 plus, and I see breakdown in the body. And so that car, that body that you're moving around in, that for the next how many ever years you have, that's going to take you to Portugal and Spain and Japan, or it's going to take
Or
you to the
Bali.
beach, or Bali, or it's going to take you to the beach to watch a sunset, or it's going to take you to the end of the block, or it's going to take you out walking your dog. That's going to break down if you don't pay attention to it. And so, both of us being yoga teachers, not only do we teach others, but every single day we do something for our own bodies. And I think the awareness of, and for both of us, of this body and how it could break down is what gets us to do what we do every day. So, can you just share some physical things that you do on a daily basis, whether that's and anything? I want to know because I'd love to
Okay.
let people understand that
Tell you
from a
my morning
self, yeah,
routine.
whether it's a routine or even things like what's important to you, where do you place um, emphasis on? What do you place emphasis on a daily basis in order to maintain your body slash car?
Okay. Hydration, I already mentioned. I start off the morning with that. I try to make everything that we eat in our house, and I tend to end up doing most of the cooking, and I certainly do all of the grocery shopping, so I have lots of control over that. Try to cook everything from scratch, and to me that makes a huge difference because I know exactly what is in every single thing that goes on our plates, and there's so much joy. I really take a lot of pleasure in preparing great food and just making sure that that's available for everybody in the house. I like to go outside. I try and garden. I try and see what's around me. So pleasure is a huge aspect, I think, of self-care. So for me, there are little things that give me great pleasure, and I take time to notice them. So it might be going out into the garden barefoot in the morning, picking a couple of flowers, putting them in little bud bars, bringing them in, making myself a pot of tea, deciding what I'm going to cook for supper, putting on some nice music, maybe doing some terrible dancing, cuddling up with the dogs, physical touch, so cuddling my kids, talking to friends. That human interaction is hugely important to me, so I will always have some kind of engagement with a friend or a client or a class that I'm teaching. So people are really important. Family is important. So it's just spending my time through the day. I mean, I could be driving somewhere. I don't tend to find driving very exciting, but I will try and make it more interesting. So I'll listen to a podcast, or we have these lovely windy roads. There's always something interesting to see. There's the green is phenomenal at the moment, and the flowers, the sky, that kind of thing. It's not necessarily about doing something or consuming something, but it's being present, being aware of being alive. For me, that's really powerful self-care. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. So we spend most of our time as human doings and not as human beings. And what you described was human, when you're in the state of human being, that is when you're self care. And that is, as I'm listening to you describe you and what you do on a daily basis, that's how I choose to show up every day as well. I get up in the morning, I walk, I watch the bunny rabbits scurry as I come near them. In the spring, the mustard flowers are in full bloom. Now I see how they're dying because it's the end of the summer, but I even see that process of shifting from one season to the next. There's a stephanotis bush about a mile into my 4-mile walk where I take the flower and I spend the rest of my 3 miles smelling the beautiful aroma. Then there's a star jasmine plant that I come to not too far afterwards, and some days I'll take a star jasmine off. Very aware also of what I'm taking. I make sure that the stephanotis is either close to falling off or even some of them on the ground. The star jasmine, if there's enough there, because I want the others that walk by these bushes to be greeted with the beautiful aromas as well. I live in a place where there's peacocks. And the other day there was a peahen with her 3 babies. And I watched her protect those 3 babies from the teenager that was coming near her. I look at the plants. I am very observant of what I'm doing. I choose to go down the paths. There's this little tiny side path on the road that I'm on where it goes off to the side and it has like wood chippings in it and it looks really cute and curved. So I'll choose to go on that because it looks pretty. And when I'm on that path, it feels like I'm in the forest, not on the street with the cars. And then, yes, the hydration piece, the food piece, before I eat something, I'll ask myself, will this nourish me? Is this alive? Is it full of energy and nutrition? And when I'm craving something crazy, I'll ask myself, am I in a stressed place? Was I human doing? And my human doing burned through a lot of internal energy. And now I need to satiate myself. So I want that sweet thing or the chocolate or whatever. And so just trying to be even aware of that aspect. And so again, back to the awareness piece, the human being piece, and really maybe polishing, maybe for both of us, because I'd say we both show up as pretty happy humans in our lives. I do think it's because of what we do in life that this happens. Then it's when we're human being and we're always looking for how can I human be instead of human do.
Yeah, I something I find really interesting about people talking about self-care is quite often and quite quickly it goes down the sort of magazine article route of well, have a hot bath with a glass of champagne and get a massage and get your nails done. And that's, I don't have anything negative to say about doing any of those things, but I think below that, that's sort of almost like the icing on the cake. You need to make sure that the structure is sound. And one thing I find a lot of my clients tend to do, and I think we all do it, maybe some of us are less aware about how much we're doing it, and that is not talking to ourselves very nicely, not practicing good self-compassion, self-love in our self-talk. And I find that it's hugely damaging to allow that negative self-talk to go on unchecked. So, one of the first things I might do with a client is try and get them to just look at how they talk to themselves. And then there's that little tiny awareness piece where maybe they catch themselves during the day, seeing themselves in the mirror and saying something horrible to themselves. It might just kind of go, oh, we talked about that. It's not very good for me to do that. And I give them some tools to use to try and just change the tone, just be a little kinder, practice a little more self-care in the self-talk. And I do think that that's something that we should be teaching children right from a very early age. Positive, kind, loving self-talk as a self-care piece.
Oh, yeah. A lot of self-sabotage, lots happening with negative mindsets for all of us, right? So looking at the negative, and that's just such a big piece. Yeah. So positive self-talk, they say that we become our thoughts. So when you start to actually put in those positive words, or I am this, I am that, you actually start to really feel that, become that, and then visualizing yourself in what it is you want for yourself so that you can move towards that. Yeah, and I love that. I love that you said foundation. It made me think about what I specialize in, which is bone health. And
Yeah.
our
That's
bones
exactly
are our
what we do.
foundation. But then I thought about, what about the mental foundation? What about the structural aspects of who we are? So yes. Okay, so question. Is self-care selfish?
Oh, okay. Um, I think it's everybody's sort of almost obligation to care for themselves as well as they are able to at that time in their lives. And what that does when you care for yourself properly is it enables you to show up first for yourself and then for everybody around you. So in caring for yourself properly and well and lovingly and compassionately and making yourself the best person that you could possibly be, whatever that might take, you're there for other people. So, it's beneficial to everyone around you when you are your best self. So it's not really selfish, it's more selfish if you don't. There's a sort of, there can be a martyrish tint to it when people do not take care of themselves properly. But actually, it then has repercussions for everyone around them because they're not happy, they're not productive, they're perhaps not healthy, and then they have to be carried. So actually, it's selfish not to care for yourself.
Exactly. And I think that, so I just pulled up the word selfish to look at what the definition was. So the definition of the word selfish is, it's an adjective, of a person, action, or motive, lacking consideration for others, concerned chiefly with one's own personal profit or pleasure. That's what the word selfish means. I think the problem is actually in our human way of having this word selfish and the way we describe it, because the perspective you just shared and what I believe to be true from a bigger mindset piece, which is to me more of a yogic or more of an Eastern way of thinking, is self. If I think of me, Debbie, the self, I have roles in this life. I'm a friend, I'm a mother, I'm a teacher, I'm a wife, I'm a neighbor, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. I have all those roles. And so, in order for me to show up in all those roles fully and in the best way possible, I need to make sure that I am healthy and happy in those roles. So, if I'm going to take care of Debi in all of those roles in self care so that I could show up to be the best this, the best this, the best this, that's not selfish. So, I think the problem really is in the way we think of this word selfish. And like you said, it's selfish to not have self care because then you're not going to show up to be your best self for others. So, yeah, all right. So, I think that we're doing this right. I think that what we're doing is right. I really do. I mean, people tell me all the time, oh my gosh, you're so happy. And it's like, I don't feel like I'm Pollyanna. And yes, I'm not always, I mean, life is life. I am choosing to be happy, to be healthy, to move my body, to do all the things from a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual place that I know to help me be the best version of myself.
I think the sort of selfish piece as well is, I guess, when people are thinking about taking things for themselves to make themselves feel better. And that might be me going into my kitchen and taking a teapot and making myself a pot of tea. If I'm depriving somebody else of some tea, then yeah, that is selfish. But if I'm not depriving anybody else of anything, but I am looking after myself properly, then yeah, in no way is that selfish. Yeah. Back to the tea again. I never get too far away from the tea, I'm afraid.
Well, I love that. So, for those listening, following Kate on Instagram, tell me what's the Instagram name? Your Instagram?
Aramaya,
Caramaya,
Aramaya.
Caramaya. Yeah, because you are so into food. We didn't even really talk much about food, I know, and that's a big piece for both
Great.
of
How
us.
long we got? About a year to talk
We
about.
we we didn't get to that, although we become what we eat. And in yoga therapy, there are 7 layers of a human, or sorry, wait, actually, in yoga therapy, there are 5 layers of the human being. And the first layer is the Annamaya kosha. And Anna is food. We are made out of food. And in the work that I do, I'm sure the work that you do as a health coach, the food is the information and the building blocks of everything in our body. So making sure that you choose the right food is really important. And I know we didn't get into that, but maybe we could do another podcast on that because I think that's a much bigger topic because we both cook a lot. We both really know food. I think it'd be great to have a bigger, deeper discussion on that. But in the meantime, I'd love for people to see what you post because you post. Not only do you post delicious, healthy food, it is beautiful. And
Oh,
so I love that. And we all need guidance from each other. We're all here to, be teachers for each other. So hopefully ladies will follow your Instagram and look at what you post. Okay, so before we go, we are hosting a retreat in Bali because we both know the value of self-care, and I would look forward to that with you and for this retreat and many others. So, our retreats are going to be, let's think, I want to think about a term for them because I think the word selfish and self care, we could come up with a title for our retreats.
well, it is all about self care, isn't it? I mean, there isn't. You kind of want another word that's just a little bit more fun sounding, perhaps. But I can't think of one.
Right. And
It,
that's what we're doing, right? That's my goal is the people that come on these retreats with me or these journeys with me is to, for it to be maximum pleasure for the body, the soul, and the mind.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
All
and
right.
completely just about self care, whatever that means for that person, whether it's a tiny little step, or whether it's a great big
And you know what it starts with? Sign me up.
shift.
Sign me up. I'm doing this for me because that is, you just took that first step. You walked into the room and you flipped the switch on. And now you get to see what needs attention, what you need to pay attention to. Okay, Kate, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that for me, the biggest thing that came out of this, the biggest pieces of awareness that I would like for people to get from this podcast is this: self-care is not selfish. Awareness is a very big key player, maybe first step in actually understanding the why, what, and how of self-care. So those are like two big really things that came up for me. What are like last either one thought or two thoughts you'd like to end with, at your big piece of wisdom that comes from you?
Everybody's different. So what you need is what you need. It doesn't have to be what sounds great to other people, what people are saying is self-care. For you, self-care might be just quietly sitting on your own in a room and taking some calm, deep breaths, and that might be what you need. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be life-changing. It's knowing what you need and then making sure that you get it.
Yes. Self-care, knowing your own self, right? Knowing who you are. All right, Kate, thank you so much for joining us. So if ladies would like to get in touch with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, Instagram, Cara Maya Wellbeing, or always Google my name. I think all that stuff will come up there.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for joining us. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. And we'll need to have you back to talk food. That's a big, important topic.
Anytime.
All right, Kate.
Thank you very much for having me, and I will see you in Bali.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to Stronger Bones Lifestyle Podcast. Bone loss is not an inevitable part of aging. We don't have to just wait for it to happen. There is so much that you can do, and that is what you will learn each week on the show. Go to my website, debirobinson.com, if you want more information about what was shared in today's episode. At the bottom of this episode in the show notes, there will be links to whatever was shared. Please subscribe to this podcast. Share this podcast with your friends, your family, or any women that you think may be interested or benefit from the information we're sharing. Please rate the podcast. And if you have any questions you'd like asked or answered, I would love to hear from you. Let's do this, ladies. Let's change the way the world views osteoporosis and slow down, stop, or reverse our bone loss, take charge, and show other ladies what is possible. Thank you so much for joining me.